Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you, honey. The night my house burned down, my mother laughed like she had just won the lottery. She was not shocked. She looked satisfied. They never asked if I was hurt. They just posed for photos with the fire trucks. 1 year later, I came back without a single drop of gasoline. Now I am watching their perfect world burn down simply because I am no longer there to put out the flames. My name is Meyer Perry. I was 31 years old when the world decided to show me exactly where I stood in the order of things. It did not happen with a whisper. It happened with a scream of metal and the roar of an inferno that sounded like a freight train had derailed inside my living room. It was a Tuesday, just a standard humid Tuesday in Raleigh, North Carolina. I had just walked through the door of my duplex. My feet were throbbing. I spent my days staring at spreadsheets and risk assessment models at Breakforge Analytics, but the mental fatigue always seemed to settle in my arches by 5 in the afternoon. I had kicked off my heels. I had pulled on an oversized promotional t-shirt I got from a tech conference 3 years ago. I was pouring a glass of water from the tap when the first alarm blared. It was not the polite chirp of a battery dying. It was the full-throated wail of a system detecting catastrophe. I did not smell smoke at first. I only heard the sound. Then came the heat. It hit me like a physical blow, a solid wall of pressure pushing from the hallway. I dropped the glass. It shattered on the linoleum, but I barely heard the crash over the raw. The wall behind the stove seemed to ripple. The paint bubbled and peeled back like skin, revealing an orange brightness that should not have been there. Rhyme. The command did not come from my brain. It came from my spine. I did not grab my purse. I did not grab the laptop that contained 5 years of my life. I did not grab the keys to my sedan. I turned and ran out the front door, stumbling over the threshold, my bare feet slapping against the concrete of the driveway. I made it to the street just as the front window blew out. It sounded like a gunshot. Shards of glass sprayed across the small patch of lawn I had mowed 2 days ago. I stood on the asphalt, the heat radiating against my face, singing the eyebrows. I spent too much time grooming. My chest was heaving. I could not find enough air. The smoke was thick and oily, tasting of burning plastic and insulation. This was my house. It was not a mansion. It was a modest 2-bedroom duplex on the edge of town, the kind of place you buy when you are trying to prove you can stand on your own 2 feet. It was the first thing I had ever owned that did not have a string attached to my parents. I had saved for 4 years for the down payment. I had skipped vacations. I had eaten instant noodles more nights than I cared to admit. I had signed the papers with a shaking hand, terrified and proud. Now I watched the vinyl siding melt. It dripped like hot wax. The roof was already smoking, dark plumes spiraling up into the night sky to blot out the stars. Sirens wailed in the distance. They sounded miles away. They would be too late. I knew it in my gut. The fire was eating the structure with a hunger that felt personal. Then another sound cut through the chaos. Tires screeching. A car engine revving too loud. I turned away from the heat to see a sleek silver SUV mount the curb 3 houses down. I knew that car. I knew the custom license plate. I knew the way the driver parked, crooked and entitled, blocking a hydrant because the rules were just suggestions for people like them. The Perry family had arrived. They did not rush to me. They did not run with blankets or water. They spilled out of the car like they were arriving at a red carpet event that just happened to be lit by a burning building. Candace, my mother, was the first one out. She was wearing a beige trench coat that probably cost more than my deductible. Her hair was perfectly blown out, stiff with hairspray catching the amber glow of the flames. She held her phone up immediately, not to call 911. The screen was glowing. The camera app open. Glenn, my father, followed. He slammed the car door. He was wearing his signature polo shirt with the logo of his contracting business stitched on the breast pocket. He looked annoyed, not worried. Annoyed like my house sire was a traffic jam making him late for dinner. Tesser, my sister, and Kyle, my brother, brought up the rear. Tesser was already typing. I could see the rapid movement of her thumbs. Kyle was holding the gimbal. He actually brought a stabilizer for his phone. They walked toward me, but their eyes were on the fire. "Meyer!" Kyle shouted, but he wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at the inferno behind me. He lifted the gimbal, panning smoothly from the burning roof down to where I stood, shivering in my oversized shirt. "Holy crap, look at that color. That is intense." I wrapped my arms around myself. "Kyle." My voice was a croak. The smoke had scoured my throat raw. He didn't answer. He was zooming in. "Content for tonight. Guys, this is going viral. Real-time disaster." I looked at my father. Glenn was standing with his arms crossed over his chest, shaking his head. He looked at the house he had criticized when I bought it because it wasn't a new build, the house he refused to help me inspect, and he sneered. "I told you," Glenn said. His voice was loud, booming over the crackle of the flames. "I told you this place was a dump. You always bring bad luck into other people's houses, Meyer. It is a curse. It's my house. Dad," I whispered. "It's mine." "Not anymore," he said, gesturing to the collapsing porch. "Now it is just a pile of liability." I waited for the hug. I waited for someone to ask if I had inhaled smoke. I waited for the basic human question, "Are you okay?" Instead, Tessa stepped up beside me. She angled her body so the fire was in the background, the lighting dramatic and tragic. She held her phone up for a selfie. She didn't put her arm around me. She just made sure I was vaguely in the frame, a prop to sell the authenticity of the moment. "Don't move," Tessa murmured, snapping 3 rapid photos. She checked them immediately. "GH. The lighting is actually kind of amazing. Very raw." She started typing a caption. She read it out loud as she typed, a habit she developed from years of trying to be the center of attention. "Sometimes you have to burn bridges to see where the light comes from. Burning bridges, no path back, heartbroken, but rising." She looked at me. "Is that too much? Or is it brave?" "I think it's brave. My house is burning down, Tesser." I said, "This isn't a metaphor." She rolled her eyes, finally looking at me. "Don't be dramatic, Meyer. It's just things. You're always so attached to material stuff. It's about the journey." And then there was Candace. My mother stood a few feet away. She was not taking photos anymore. She was just watching. The fire trucks were turning the corner now, their lights flashing red and white, painting her face in a strobe effect. She looked at the flames devouring the living room where I had hosted my first Thanksgiving alone because they had all gone to carbo without telling me. She watched the roof groan and sag, and then she smiled. It wasn't a sad smile. It wasn't a nervous tick. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. It was the smile of a woman who had just been proven right about something she had argued for decades. She laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Then again, har. I froze. The heat on my back felt insignificant compared to the chill that went through my chest. "Mom." Candace turned to look at me. Her eyes were bright. She looked younger than 55 in that light. She looked energized. "Well," she said, smoothing the lapel of her expensive coat. Finally, I asked. "What do you mean, finally?" "Calmer," Candace said, her voice dropping to that cold, sweet tone she used when she was tearing someone apart over brunch. "Finally, Calmer took out the trash." The world stopped, the sirens, the fire, the shouting of the neighbors. It all faded into a dull buzz. Calmer took out the trash. She wasn't talking about the furniture. She wasn't talking about the old drywall. She was looking right at me. "You really are hopeless, Meyer," she continued, waving a hand at the destruction. "I mean, look at this. We have to come all the way out here to deal with your mess again. It is always something with you. At least the lighting is good for the stream." She turned back to her phone. "Okay, everyone," she said, her voice pitching up an octave into her influencer persona. "We are here at the scene. It is devastating. Just devastating. My poor daughter. Please send prayers and stars. We are going to need so much support to get through this trauma." She posed. She actually posed. Hand on her forehead, eyes cast down the fire raging behind her. Glenn was talking to a firefighter who had just jumped off the truck. He wasn't asking about my safety. I could hear him. "I'm a contractor. Glenn Perry Construction. I can tell you right now, the wiring in these old units is garbage. I told her, "You should put that in the report. Negligence." He was establishing the narrative. He was making sure that if anyone asked, he was the expert who foresaw it. And I was the fool who ignored him. Kyle was live streaming. "Yo, chat, look at the roof. It's going to collapse in 3, 2. A beam gave way with a thunderous crash. Sparks shot up like fireworks. "Yo," Kyle yelled, laughing. "Did you see that? I called it clip. That someone clipped that." I stood there barefoot on the cold asphalt. My toes were numb. My shirt smelled of smoke. My hair was matted to my forehead with sweat. I looked at them. I looked at Tesser checking her engagement metrics. I looked at Glenn trying to sell his business card to a first responder. I looked at Kyle treating my tragedy like a video game. I looked at Candace checking her reflection in the phone screen to make sure her mascara hadn't run. They hadn't asked. Not one of them. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was silent, like a wire being cut in the dark. I did not cry. The tears that had been threatening to fall since I ran out the door suddenly evaporated. My eyes felt dry and hot. I looked at the phone in my mother's hand. I memorized the brand of the case leather, monogrammed. I memorized the exact pitch of her laughter. I memorized the sound of the wood groaning as my sanctuary died. I reached into the pocket of my oversized shorts. My phone was there. It was the only thing I had saved purely by instinct. I opened the rideshare app. My fingers were steady. I typed in a destination, not a hotel, just away, anywhere away. A car was 2 minutes away. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't scream at them. I didn't beg them to care. I realized in that moment that begging them to care was like begging the fire to stop burning. It was not in their nature. I turned my back on the house. I turned my back on the family. The Yuba, a beat-up Honda Civic, pulled up to the curb, navigating around the fire hoses. The driver looked terrified. He rolled down the window. "Meyer," he asked, his eyes wide as he looked at the blaze. "Yes," I said. I opened the back door and slid in. "Man, is that you okay?" The driver asked, "Do you need the police? Do you need an ambulance?" "Just drive," I said. My voice was flat, dead. "But your family?" He pointed to the group of 4 people standing by the silver SUV, bathed in the orange glow. Candace was doing a second take of her intro video. Kyle was high-fiving the air. I looked at them through the tinted window. They looked like strangers. No, strangers would have had more empathy. They looked like parasites who had found a new host to feed on. "They are not my family," I said. "They are just the audience." "Go," I told the driver. He pulled away. I watched them shrink in the rear view mirror. They didn't even notice I was gone. They had the fire. They had the content. They had the tragedy to exploit. They didn't need the victim. Candace's laugh echoed in my head, louder than the sirens. Calmer took out the trash. I sat back against the worn fabric seat and closed my eyes. "You're right, Mom," I whispered to the empty air. It finally did. To understand why I stood on a street corner watching my life incinerate while my family hunted for likes, you have to understand the Perry family brand. You have to understand the Sunday dinners from the outside. Looking in through the curated lens of my mother's Instagram feed, Sunday dinner at the Perry household was a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting updated for the modern influencer age. It was roast chicken with skin the color of polished mahogany. It was fresh arugula salads tossed in hand-turned wooden bowls. It was laughter frozen in high definition, capturing a family that genuinely enjoyed one another's company. The reality was a production set. We were not allowed to eat until the lighting was correct. I remember one specific Sunday about 3 months before the fire. The roast chicken was getting cold. The grease was starting to congeal into white waxy flakes on the platter. My stomach was growling, a low rumble that I tried to hide by coughing, but we could not touch a fork because Candace, my mother, was not satisfied with the shadows falling across the centerpiece of hydrangeas. She moved the ring light 3 times. She adjusted the exposure on her phone. She commanded us to smile, then to laugh naturally. "Glenn, tell a joke." She snapped, her voice tight with the stress of a director losing light. "Tesser, throw your head back. Make it look like pure joy." Meyer, stop slouching. "You look like a question mark." We performed. We always performed. And once the shutter clicked and the image was secured for her 40,000 followers, the atmosphere instantly died. The smiles dropped like heavy curtains. The food was passed around in silence, mostly because it was lukewarm and dry. This was the Perry way. The image was the product. The reality was just the packaging you threw away. My father, Glenn, was the architect of a different kind of fiction. He was a general contractor, the owner of a business he liked to call an empire, but was actually 3 vans in a rotating crew of guys who smoked too much during breaks. His personal brand was the rugged, self-made American male. He loved to stand at the head of the table, waving a fork like a scepter, lecturing us on the virtues of independence. "Nobody gave me a handout," he would say, staring pointedly at Kyle. "My brother, I built this roof over your heads with sweat and grit. The government takes 40%, and I still win. That is resilience. You kids need to learn that. You kill what you eat." I would sit there chewing the dry chicken and bite my tongue until it bled. I bit my tongue because I knew the truth. I knew the truth because every April the rugged, self-made man would walk into my small duplex, drop a cardboard box filled with crumpled, coffee-stained receipts on my coffee table and say, "You are good with numbers." Meyer sought this out for me. The accountant is trying to rob me again. Glenn Perry did not kill what he ate. He ate because I spent 3 weekends in a row unraveling his chaotic finances. I was the one who categorized his expenses. I was the one who found the deduction for the new truck he forgot to log. I was the one who noticed he had double paid a vendor for lumber 3 times in a single quarter because he refused to use digital banking. One year, he owed the IRS $12,000 in back taxes because of a calculation error he made on a napkin. I found the error. I filed the amended return. I negotiated the penalty abatement letter. I saved him nearly $8,000. When the letter from the IRS came confirming the correction, Glenn did not thank me. He tossed the letter on the counter and said, "See, I knew those bureaucrats were wrong. I told them to check it again. You just have to be tough with them." He truly believed he had done it. That was the magic of Glenn. He rewrote history in real time so that he was always the hero, and I was just the invisible mechanism that made the hero's journey possible. Then there was Tesser. My older sister worked in events, a vague title that seemed to encompass everything from planning weddings to arranging cheese boards for corporate retreats. Her life was a mood board. She spoke in captions. She didn't buy furniture. She curated a space. She didn't go on vacation. She sought alignment. Tesser was the queen of intentional living, which usually meant spending money she did not have on things she did not need to impress people she did not like. "I need this venue deposit to clear by Friday," she would text me, usually at 11 at night. "The client is good for it, but their wire is stuck in international clearing. Can you float me 2,000? It is just for 48 hours. I do not want to lose the aesthetic of this hall." I would transfer the money. I always transferred the money, and when the client paid her, she wouldn't pay me back immediately. She would buy a new designer handbag or upgrade her lease to a luxury sedan because image is equity in this industry. "Meyer, you wouldn't understand. You work in a cubicle." She was right. I did work in a cubicle, or at least a glass-walled office that felt like one. I was a senior financial operations analyst at Bright Forge Analytics. My entire career was built on seeing things that others missed. I looked for variance. I looked for risk. I looked for the tiny hairline fractures in a company's ledger that could turn into a canyon if left unchecked. At Bright Forge, I was respected. When I flagged a discrepancy in the quarterly projections, the VP of Finance listened. When I built a model to predict cash flow issues, they implemented my strategy. I was competent. I was sharp. I was the person you went to when you wanted the unvarnished truth. But at home, my master's degree in finance and my 6 years of corporate experience were reduced to a household utility. I was like the dishwasher or the thermostat. I was just there to make things run. "You're good with numbers" was the phrase that haunted me. It sounded like a compliment, but it was actually a dismissal. It implied that what I did was easy, a natural talent like having curly hair or being tall rather than a skill I had honed over thousands of hours. It was Kyle who finally broke the illusion for me. My younger brother was 26 and had never held a job for longer than 6 months. He was a visionary. He was always one pivot away from being a millionaire. First, it was reselling limited edition sneakers. Then, it was drop shipping cheap plastic gadgets from overseas. Then it was cryptocurrency. Kyle did not ask for help. He created emergencies. I remember a Tuesday afternoon about a year ago. I was in the middle of a high-stakes meeting at Brightforge presenting a variance report to the board. My phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it vibrated continuously for 10 seconds. I glanced down. It was Kyle. Emergency. Cops involved. Pick up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I excused myself from the meeting, terrified that he had been hurt or arrested or worse. I ran into the hallway and called him back. What happened? I gasped. Are you okay, Meyer? Chill, Kyle said. His voice was not panicked. It was annoyed. Look, my card got declined at the impound lot. They took the Tesla. I need $600 to get it out, or the daily storage fee goes up. Can you Venmo me? I'll send it back as soon as my crypto wallet sinks. He wasn't hurt. He was just broke and irresponsible. Kyle, I am in a board meeting. I whispered, furious. You said cops were involved. Yeah, well, the tow truck driver looked like a cop, he said. Come on, Meyer. Don't be a hater. I'm literally stranded. I sent the money. I always sent the money because the alternative was my mother calling me, crying about how I was abandoning my baby brother, or my father lecturing me about family loyalty. That night I went home to my duplex, the quiet, safe space I paid for with my own salary, and I opened my laptop. I did not open Netflix. I did not open a book. I opened Excel. I created a new file. I named it the Family Ledger. At first, I told myself it was just for tracking. I wanted to see where the leaks were. I was an analyst. After all, you cannot fix a problem you cannot measure. But as I began to type, digging through my bank statements, my emails, and my text history, the spreadsheet morphed into something else. It became a record of reality. I created columns. Date, requester, the crisis, the fixed cost, time, cost, money, and the most important column, the narrative. The narrative was where I recorded what they said happened versus what actually happened. Date, March 10th. Request, Candace, the crisis. She forgot to renew the domain name for her lifestyle blog, and the site went down right before a brand sponsorship went live. She was hysterical. The fix. I spent 4 hours on the phone with the hosting company, paid the expedited reinstatement fee, and relink DNS servers. Cost $204 hours of sleep. The narrative. Candace posted a story the next day, thanking the universe for aligning her technology, and said she manifested the solution through positive thinking. I typed another entry. Date, July 4th. Request, Glenn. The crisis. He underbid a deck project by 15% because he did the math in his head. He was going to lose money on materials. The fix. I created a spreadsheet for him to track material waste and found a supplier who offered a bulk discount if he ordered through a corporate account, which I set up for him. Cost 6 hours of research and setup. The narrative. At the barbecue, Glenn bragged to the neighbors that he squeezed the suppliers because he knows how to talk to guys in the trade. Row after row, sheet after sheet. I went back 5 years. I went through old credit card statements. I found the plane tickets I bought for Tessa when she was stranded in Tulum. She wasn't stranded. She spent her return ticket money on a spa package. I found the bail money, technically a legal processing fee, I paid for Kyle when he got caught selling counterfeit tickets. The numbers were staggering, but the emotional toll was heavier. The family ledger revealed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. They were not just disorganized, they were predatory. They had built a system where my competence was the foundation for their incompetence. They could afford to be messy, risky, and delusional because they had a safety net. I was the suspension bridge that kept them from falling into the ravine, but they treated me like the troll living underneath it. The most painful realization came from the notes section I added to the file. I started recording their reaction to my help. "You're so uptight about money, Meyer. Why do you have to make everything so complicated? It must be nice to have a boring job where you just sit around all day." They gaslit me into believing that my stability was a character flaw. They made me feel boring for being responsible. They made me feel guilty for having savings when they had none, even though I earned less than Glenn and Tesser combined in a good year. I looked at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my glasses. The file was heavy. It was dense with data. It proved that the perfect mom, the self-made dad, the intentional sister, and the visionary brother were all fictional characters. They were a hollow shell. I was the structural steel holding them up. I closed the laptop at night, feeling a strange mix of validation and horror. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unloving. I was just used. I didn't stop helping them immediately. Habits are hard to break, especially when they are forged in blood. But the family ledger changed the way I listened to them. When Candace called with a crisis, I didn't feel panic anymore. I felt the cold detachment of an auditor noting a discrepancy. I started to see them not as family, but as liabilities. And the thing about liabilities is eventually you have to write them off. I just didn't know that the final audit would happen in the glow of my own burning house. While they treated the destruction of my equity as a backdrop for their vanity, I thought I was writing a ledger. I didn't realize I was writing the preamble to a war. The morning sun that filtered through the cheap curtains of the motel room was not welcoming. It was harsh and dusty, illuminating the millions of particles floating in the stagnant air. I woke up on a mattress that felt like it was filled with old newspapers, staring at a popcorn ceiling stained with water damage. For a brief, blissful second, I forgot. Then I inhaled. The smell was the first thing to return. It was baked into my skin. It was trapped in the fibers of the oversized t-shirt I was still wearing. It was the smell of wet ash, melted plastic, and the ghosts of everything I had ever owned. I sat up. My head throbbed with a dehydration headache that felt like a nail being driven behind my right eye. I looked around the room. It was beige and brown, impersonal and ugly. My entire life had been reduced to the clothes on my back, my phone, and the laptop bag I had instinctively grabbed. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. The screen was cracked in the corner, a spiderweb fracture I did not remember getting. I tapped it awake, wincing at the artificial brightness. There were notifications, dozens of them, but there were no missed calls. There was no voicemail from Glenn asking if I had found a place to sleep. There was no text from Candace asking if I had money for food. There was no message from Tesser checking if I was in shock. Instead, I saw that I had been tagged. I opened the social media app, my finger hovering over the icon with a dread that settled heavy in my stomach. Kyle had sent a message to the family group chat. It was a meme. It was a picture of a cartoon doll sitting in a burning room drinking coffee saying, "This is fine." Beneath it, Kyle had added a photo he must have taken last night. A blurry shot of my collapsed roof with a timestamp. "Home sweet home." He wrote fire emoji, skull emoji. I scrolled down. Tesser had posted 40 minutes ago. It was a photo of her brunch. A perfectly poached egg sat atop a slice of artisan toast surrounded by edible flowers. The lighting was soft, angelic. The caption read, "Sunday reset." Sometimes people burn bridges and then wonder why they cannot cross back. Protecting my peace and focusing on intentional growth today. She was eating an $1.18 toast while I was washing soot off my face in a motel sink, and she had framed it as her personal triumph over toxicity. The toxicity apparently was my house burning down. Then I saw Candace's post. It was a carousel of images titled Family Cozy Night. The first photo was of the four of them, Glenn, Candace, Tesser, and Kyle sitting at a late-night diner. They were holding milkshakes. They were smiling. My mother's face was radiant, her makeup flawless despite the smoky air she had stood in hours before. So grateful for these moments. The caption read, "Life is unpredictable. Hold your loved ones close. We are shaken but standing strong together, sending love to everyone battling their own storms." She had edited me out of the narrative completely. There was no mention of the fire, no mention of the daughter who was currently homeless, just a vague allusion to storms that garnered her 300 comments of support like, "You are such a rock, Candace and beautiful family." I put the phone down on the nightstand. I did not throw it. I did not scream. I felt a coldness spread from my chest to my fingertips. a numbness that was far more terrifying than rage. They had not just abandoned me, they had erased me. To them, my tragedy was just an inconvenience that they had already processed, packaged, and monetized. I got up and walked to the bathroom. The mirror showed a stranger. My eyes were rimmed with red. There was a smudge of soot on my neck that looked like a bruise. I turned on the shower. The water took 3 minutes to turn warm, and even then it was lukewarm. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, trying to wash away the smell of the fire that I knew it was deeper than my paws. When I stepped out, wrapped in a scratchy towel that smelled of industrial bleach, I went into survival mode. This was what I did. I was an operations analyst. I solved problems. I managed risk. I sat at the small wobbly desk in the corner of the room and opened my laptop. I did not cry. I opened a spreadsheet. I spent the next 6 hours making calls. My voice was steady, professional, stripping away all emotion as I spoke to the insurance adjuster. Yes, the policy number is 459-882, I said. Total loss, structural collapse. No, I do not have receipts for the appliances. They are melted. I called the fire department to request the official incident report. I called the utility companies to disconnect the gas and electric services that were no longer servicing anything but a pile of charcoal. I called my bank to freeze my cards, just in case they had been left inside. Though I knew the fire had likely taken care of the plastic, I navigated the labyrinth of bureaucracy alone. I was on hold for 45 minutes with the mortgage company listening to a looped saxophone solo while my family was likely finishing their brunch. Around 2:00 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text. My heart did not jump this time. I expected another meme from Kyle or a demand from Glenn. It was from Sarah. Sarah was a former colleague from Bright Forge. We had worked together in risk management for 2 years before she moved to a different firm. We were not close friends. We grabbed lunch occasionally. We exchanged polite emails on birthdays, saw the news on the local feed. The text read, "Holy S.H. Meyer, are you safe? Do you need a place to crash? I have a guest room, or if you need help with the insurance paperwork, I can come over. Let me know." I stared at the screen, my vision blurred. This woman who barely knew my middle name, who had no obligation to me, offered me a room. She offered to help with the paperwork. My own mother had offered me a hashtag. That text message was the only thing that nearly broke me. It was a slap in the face. It highlighted the vast gaping void where my family should have been. It proved that basic human decency existed, which meant my family's lack of it was a choice, not an accident. "I am okay," I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. "I am at a motel. I have it covered. But thank you. Seriously, thank you." I could not accept her help. I could not let anyone see me like this. I needed to disappear. I spent the rest of the afternoon searching for an apartment. I did not look for a house. I did not want a lawn. I did not want a guest room. I wanted a fortress. By 5:00, I had found it. It was a studio apartment in a converted warehouse downtown. It was small, barely 500 square ft. It had exposed brick walls and a single window that looked out onto an alleyway, but it was available immediately. And more importantly, the building had a key fob entry system and a heavy steel deadbolt on the unit door. I signed the lease electronically. I paid the first month's rent and the security deposit from my emergency fund, the fund Glenn always mocked me for having. I checked out of the motel and took a cab to the studio. I had no furniture. I had no mattress. I stopped at a department store on the way and bought an air mattress, a pillow, a blanket, and a single mug. When I locked the door of that studio behind me, the sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. Click. It was a hard, definitive sound. It was the sound of separation. I inflated the mattress in the center of the empty room. The hum of the electric pump echoed off the brick walls. I sat down on the plastic surface, the room illuminated only by the street lamp outside the window. I was alone, truly completely alone, and for the first time in 31 years, I was not afraid of someone barging in. I was not afraid of Glenn demanding I fix his tax return. I was not afraid of Candace criticizing my curtains. I was not afraid of Kyle raiding my fridge. They did not know where I was. I opened my laptop again. I did not go to the insurance forms this time. I opened the file, the family ledger. I scrolled to the bottom of the sheet, past the years of unpaid loans and emotional labor. I created a new tab. I typed the header in bold, red letters. A fire. I began to type. I did not summarize. I transcribed. I needed to remember the exact syntax of their cruelty. Date Tuesday, December 29th. Event house fire. Total loss. Subject Candace Perry. Quote, finally, Calmer took out the trash. Action laughed. Took photos for Instagram content. Did not offer shelter. Subject Glenn Perry. Quote, Meyer always brings bad luck into other people's houses. It is a curse. Action attempted to solicit business from the fire marshal. Blamed victim did not offer assistance. Subject Tesser Perry, quote, burning bridges, no path back. Action used the destruction as a backdrop for a self-help post. Subject Kyle Perry, quote, content for tonight. Boom. Action live streamed the collapse of the roof. I created a new column at the end. Assistance rendered. I typed 0 in every single row. I looked at the data. It was stark. It was undeniable. In the business world, when a division consistently operates at a loss, when it drains resources and provides no return, when it actively damages the brand reputation, you do not keep funding it. You do not hope it gets better. You shut it down. A thought began to germinate in the back of my mind. It was a quiet, dangerous thought. For my entire adult life, I had been the fix. I was the one who smoothed over the cracks. I was the one who made sure Glenn's taxes didn't trigger an audit. I was the one who made sure Candace's contracts were legal. I was the one who made sure Tesser's budget didn't bankrupt her. I was the invisible infrastructure of the Perry family. They thought they were successful because they were special. They thought they were lucky. They did not realize they were only standing because I was holding them up. I looked at the flashing cursor on the spreadsheet. What would happen if I stopped? Not out of vengeance, not out of malice, but simply because I was no longer available. What if I just resigned? I didn't have to light a match to burn their world down. I didn't need gasoline. I realized sitting in that empty room with the smell of smoke still clinging to my hair that their world was already made of paper. All I had to do was stop shielding it from the wind. I saved the file. I closed the laptop. I lay down on the air mattress, pulling the cheap blanket up to my chin. The city noise outside was loud, but in here it was quiet. It was the silence of a vault. I closed my eyes. For the first time since the alarm went off, I slept. And in my dreams, I didn't see fire. I saw a house of cards swaying in a gentle breeze, waiting for gravity to do its job. The air mattress in my new studio was uncomfortable, but it offered a clarity that my old pillow-top bed never did. In the silence of the warehouse district, stripped of my possessions and my sentimental attachments, I became pure function. I was no longer Mere the daughter or Meyer the sister. I was Mere the auditor. I sat at my wobbly desk with a fresh pot of coffee and opened my laptop. It was time to perform a forensic accounting of the Perry family. For years, I had access to their digital lives. It began as a necessity. Meyer, what is my password? Was the most common question asked at Thanksgiving. Meyer, can you upload this document? Was the refrain of every Christmas. Over time, I had simply centralized their login in my encrypted password manager to save myself the headache of resetting them every week. Now, that convenience was my weapon. I started with Glenn. I logged into his business portal for Glenn Perry Construction. The interface was clunky, a relic from the early 2000s, much like my father's business practices. I navigated to the tax compliance section. I'd expected a mess. I found a disaster. Glenn had not paid his quarterly estimated taxes for 3 consecutive quarters. The system flashed red warnings. Overdue, penalty echoing. The total amount he owed was nearly $18,000. I dug deeper. I pulled up the expense reports. He had uploaded photos of receipts taken on his dashboard. He was claiming everything. Gas for the family SUV, dinners at steakhouses that were clearly personal. A new set of golf clubs listed as client development, but it was the correspondence tab that made my blood run cold. There were 5 unread messages from the State Revenue Service. They were threatening a lien on his business assets. The contact email listed for these notifications was not Glenn's business address. It was not his personal Gmail. It was Meyer Perry Finance's Gmail.com. It was an email address I had created 6 years ago solely to handle his invoicing when his secretary quit. I hadn't used it in 4 years. I had told him to update it. He never did. He had let the notices pile up in an inbox I no longer checked, secure in the belief that if the government came knocking, they would knock on my digital door, not his. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a new folder, Evidence Glenn. I moved on to Candace. My mother's business was built on perception. She was an influencer, a lifestyle guru. Her contracts were supposed to be clean. I logged into her agency portal. I saw a list of active brand deals. There was a contract for a skincare line. I opened the PDF. It was a standard agreement requiring her to post 3 reels and 2 static posts per month. I scrolled to the payment terms. The brand had paid her in advance of $5,000 3 months ago. I checked her posting history on a separate tab. She had posted once. I checked the contract status. Breach of contract warning issued. I looked at the payout method. The direct deposit was linked to a checking account I didn't recognize. I traced the routing number. It was a joint account. I had opened it for her when I was 23 because she had bad credit and couldn't open one on her own. I was the primary account holder. She was the authorized user. I checked the activity on that account. It was overdrawn by $400. The bank had been sending overdraft fee notifications to my old phone number, the one I changed 2 years ago. Candace was spending money she hadn't earned on an account attached to my credit score for a contract she was currently violating. I took another screenshot. Evidence Candace. Next was Tesser. Tesser's event planning business was a chaotic swirl of deposits and vendor payments. I logged into her scheduling software. I looked at the budget for an upcoming wedding in June. The client had paid a $10,000 deposit for the venue. I cross-referenced this with her business bank account. The balance was $2,000. Where was the other $8,000? I scanned the transaction history. A transfer to Tesser Personal, a payment for a luxury lease, a payment to a high-end furniture store. She was floating. She was using new client deposits to pay for her personal life, likely hoping that the next client's money would come in time to pay the venue for the first client. It was a classic Ponzi structure, just on a micro scale. And who was listed as the emergency contact on the venue contracts? Who was the guarantor for the liability insurance policy she needed to operate Meyer Perry? I stared at the screen. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. This wasn't just incompetence. This was systemic usage. They had not just asked for my help. They had grafted their parasitic systems onto my identity. I was the host. My credit score, my email, my name. It was the soil they planted their weeds in. Then I got to Kyle. Kyle's digital footprint was harder to track because he moved between platforms so quickly. I checked his main email, the one I had the password for because I had set it up for him when he applied to college. I searched for confirmation. I found dozens of emails from Buy Now, Pay Later services, Klar, Affirm, Afterpay. He had bought sneakers. He had bought gaming equipment. He had bought a drone. I clicked on one of the overdue notices. Payment failed. Please update method. I looked at the billing address on the invoice. It was my address, my duplex, the one that was currently a pile of ash. He was using my address to bypass credit checks, likely because his own credit was destroyed. If the debt collectors came, they would send letters to my house. They would knock on my door. But then I found something that made me stop breathing for a moment. I was looking through a folder of scanned documents on Glenn's cloud drive. I was looking for a specific insurance document, trying to see if he had actually updated his policy like he promised. I found a PDF titled Electrical Permit Renovation PDF. The date was from 4 months ago. I remembered that week. Glenn had called me. He was in a good mood, which usually meant he wanted something. Meyer, he had said, I am doing a quick job on a flipped property downtown. The city is being a pain about the permits. They want a secondary guarantor because of that dispute I had with the zoning board last year. Can I just put your name down? It is just a formality. I will handle the work. No, Dad. I had said I was firm. I am not putting my name on a construction permit. If something goes wrong, I am liable. Do not use my name. Fine, fine. He had said, you worry too much. I will figure it out. I opened the PDF. I scrolled down to the signature line, there in a handwriting that looked vaguely like mine, but was clearly forged. Was the name Meyer Perry? He had done it anyway. He had forged my signature on a city permit for electrical work on a property I had never seen. I sat back in my chair. The plastic creaked. This was not just family stuff anymore. This was fraud. This was identity theft. If that house he renovated had a fire, if the wiring failed, I would be the one the city sued. I would be the one facing criminal negligence charges. My hands were not shaking. They were perfectly still. This was the moment the switch flipped completely. I had spent my life thinking I was the safety net. I wasn't. I was the fall guy. I opened a new document. I named it Audit Report. I did not scream. I did not call Glenn to scream. That is what they would expect. They would expect an emotional outburst that they could dismiss as Meyer being dramatic or Meyer having a meltdown. Then they would gaslight me, tell me it was no big deal, and nothing would change. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of an outburst. I was going to operate like a surgeon. I established a protocol for myself. I typed it at the top of the document. Protocol 1, no sabotage. I will not delete their files. I will not corrupt their data. I will not report them to the authorities yet. 2, no fabrication. Every piece of evidence must be real, dated, and verified. 3, revoke access. The goal is not to destroy them. The goal is to remove myself. I began to compile the dossier. I took screenshots of the forged permit. I downloaded the metadata showing when the file was created and by whom Glenn's user account. I exported the transaction logs from the joint bank account with Candace, highlighting every overdraft fee and every personal purchase. I saved the emails from Tesser's venue showing the unpaid balance and the contract listing me as guarantor. I downloaded the invoices from Kyle's buy now, pay later schemes that used my address. I worked through the night. The coffee pot ran dry. The city outside went quiet. By 4 in the morning, I had a comprehensive file. It was 50 pages long. It was a portrait of a family that had cannibalized one of their own to keep up appearances. I realized something profound as I looked at the sheer volume of their entanglement. They were not evil masterminds. They were lazy. They were entitled. They used my identity not because they wanted to hurt me, but because it was the path of least resistance. I was there. I was competent. I was family in their minds. My identity was a communal resource like the milk in the fridge. But the milk was gone. I saved the file to an encrypted cloud drive. I named it the exit strategy. I closed the laptop. My eyes burned, but my mind was crystal clear. I was not going to sue them. I was not going to yell at them. I was simply going to give them exactly what they claimed they wanted: independence. I was going to hand back every account, every password, every liability. I was going to transfer the ownership of the mess back to the people who made it. I looked at the forged signature on the screen one last time before closing the window. That was the line. That was the point of no return. Glenn had risked my freedom for a quick permit. I stood up and walked to the window. The sky was turning a bruised purple with the coming dawn. "Okay," I whispered to the glass. "You want to be self-made? Let us see what you can make when you do not have my name to sign." I had the evidence. I had the plan. Now I just had to execute the handover. It was going to be the most professional, efficient, and devastating resignation letter in the history of the Perry family. 3 days after the fire, my phone did not stop buzzing. You might think that when a family member loses everything they own in a structural inferno, the communication would be gentle. You might expect check-ins. You might expect silence out of respect for the trauma. In the Perry family, the fire had already transitioned from tragedy to content and finally to running joke. It started with a meme from Kyle in the family group chat at 7 in the morning. It was a picture of a burnt piece of toast with the caption, "Meyer's breakfast looks lit." Tessa reacted with a laughing emoji. Candace reacted with a heart emoji. Glenn did not react, but only because he still did not understand how to use emojis. I sat in my empty studio apartment drinking black coffee out of the one mug I owned and watched the notifications stack up. They did not care that I was sleeping on an air mattress. They did not care that I was wearing the same pair of jeans for the third day in a row. The machinery of their lives was grinding and I was the grease. At 8:30, the first work order arrived. It was an email from Glenn. The subject line was simply urgent. Read now. I opened it. There was no greeting. No. How are you holding up? Just a forwarded PDF from his accountant and a line of text that read, "They are saying I missed the quarterly filing for the payroll tax. This is impossible. I distinctly remember telling you to remind me. Fix this. I cannot have a lien right now. I am bidding on the Henderson job." He was blaming me for a tax filing he missed while I was literally standing in the street watching my roof collapse. I did not reply. At 9:15, Candace called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately, then a third time. In my family, 3 calls meant someone was either dead or unable to log into Netflix. I picked up. "Hello. Oh, thank God," Candace said. Her voice was breathless, tight with frustration. "Meyer, you changed the password for the insurance portal, didn't you?" "Mom," I said, rubbing my temple. "I am dealing with my own insurance right now. My house burned down. Remember." I know. It is terrible," she said dismissively, as if I had mentioned a mild headache. "But listen, I have a claim for that fender bender from last month, and the portal is asking for 2-factor authentication. I hate these portals. They are so hostile to users. Can you just log in and approve the payout? I need that check to clear before I pay the videographer for the rebranding shoot. I am at work, Mom." I lied. I was actually staring at a water stain on the brick wall. "It will take 2 minutes," she snapped. "You are so dramatic. Just do it on your lunch break. You know I get anxiety when technology doesn't work. Love you." She hung up. At 10:00, Tesser pinged me on our sister chat. Followed by 3 sparkles emojis. "So slight crisis. The bride for the September wedding wants to see the budget breakdown. But my spreadsheet looks so aggressive. It is all red lines and black text. Can you work your magic? Make it cute like soft pastels and hide the column where I put the markup for the flowers. I do not want her to see the 40% margin. Make it look like consulting fees. Thanks." She attached a file named Budget Final Real XLSX. She wanted me to help her hide a 40% markup from a client, as she wanted me to color code it in pastels. At 11, Kyle sent a photo of a crypto wallet dashboard. "Yo, if I liquidate this coin now, do I have to pay capital gains if I reinvest it into a sneakabot within 24 hours? Or is that a loophole I need to pay off the credit card before Dad sees the statement? Quick math, please." They were not asking. They were ordering. The tone was familiar, comfortable, and utterly devoid of shame. I was not their daughter or sister. I was their back-end developer, their accountant, and their legal counsel, operating on a 24-hour shift. I needed to get out of the apartment. The air was too still. The silence was amplifying the buzzing of the phone. I walked to the nearest supermarket, a high-end organic grocery store that smelled like roasted coffee and judgment. I needed toothpaste and maybe a salad that didn't come from a drive-through window. I was standing in the aisle debating between a $1.06 tube of toothpaste and a $1.04 one when I heard a familiar voice. "And that is why we always choose organic, because your body is a temple." I froze. I peeked around a display of artisanal granola. There was Candace. She was standing in the produce section holding a bunch of kale, like a bouquet of flowers. She was wearing a white linen dress that looked pristine. She had her phone propped up on the handle of her shopping cart, recording herself. She was performing. I tried to back away, to retreat into the safety of the cereal aisle, but I knocked over a stack of quinoa boxes. The sound was soft, a dull thud, but it was enough. Candace turned. Her eyes widened for a split second. I saw annoyance. I had interrupted the take. Then the mask slipped back into place. "Fire!" she cried out, her voice pitching up for the potential audience. "Oh my goodness!" She rushed over, leaving the camera rolling. She grabbed my shoulders. I was wearing a hoodie I had bought at a thrift store in sweatpants. I look like a ghost. She looked like a magazine cover. I have been so worried, she said loud enough for the shopper next to us to hear. We have been trying to reach you. Why are you ghosting the family group chat? I am not ghosting, Mom, I said quietly, pulling away. I am trying to find a place to live. Well, that is why you should come home for dinner tonight, she said, beaming. I am making my famous risotto. The followers have been asking about you. They want an update on how you are rising from the ashes. It would be such a powerful story arc for you to share. I stared at her. You want me to come to dinner so you can film me? Don't be cynical, she said, patting my cheek. I want to feed you. And if it inspires people, isn't that a bonus? Glenn is going to be there. He needs to talk to you about some tax thing. He is really stressed. Meyer, you know his blood pressure. She was guilt-tripping me about my father's blood pressure while my life was in shambles. I have to go, I said. I have an appointment. With her? She asked, suspicious. The insurance. Just let me handle the talking. You know you get flustered. Goodbye, Candace, I said. I walked away. I left my basket of groceries on the floor. I walked out of the store, my heart hammering against my ribs. My phone buzzed again as I reached the street. It was a text from David, Tesser's fiancé. David was a nice man. He was an architect, quiet, soft-spoken. I had always liked him, mostly because he seemed as bewildered by the Perrys as I was. Hey, Mir, the text read, I know they're being a lot right now. I tried to tell Tesser to give you space, but she is panicking about the wedding season. They joke about the fire, but I think it is their way of coping. They really need you. Tesser is crying over a spreadsheet. Maybe just help them one last time so things calm down. Hope you are okay. I read the message twice. They really need you. It was the hook that had caught me 1,000 times before. It was the lie that framed my servitude as nobility. If I didn't help, Tesser would cry. If I didn't help, Glenn would get a lien. If I didn't help, Candace would have anxiety. I walked back to my studio. I sat down on the air mattress. I looked at the notifications. I could ignore them. I could turn the phone off. But the habit was deep. It was etched into my neural pathways. The anxiety of their failure felt like my failure. If Glenn lost the business, who would pay the mortgage if Tesser's business failed? Who would pay her rent? It would eventually loop back to me anyway. One last time, I whispered to the empty room. It was the lie every addict tells themselves. I opened my laptop. I started with Glenn. I logged into the tax portal. I found the missing form. It was a simple data entry error he had made months ago. I corrected it. I drafted a letter of explanation for the penalty abatement. I sent it. Time 45 minutes. I moved to Candace. I reset her insurance password. I navigated the two-factor authentication by routing the code to my phone. I approved the payout. I set up a calendar reminder for her next 3 claim deadlines. Time 30 minutes. I opened Tesser's spreadsheet. I unhid the columns. I adjusted the formulas to hide the markup in a miscellaneous service fee row. I changed the color scheme to blush and sage. I added a border that looked cute. Time 1 hour. I ran the numbers for Kyle. I calculated the capital gains tax. I sent him a text. Do not sell. The fees will eat your profit. Hold for 3 days. Time 10 minutes. I hit send on the last email. The silence rushed back into the room. I waited for the relief. I waited for the sense of accomplishment. Instead, I felt dirty. I felt a profound hollow sickness in my stomach. I had just saved them again. I had cleared the obstacles from their path so they could continue to run smoothly toward their own narcissism. They would not learn. They would not say thank you. They would just assume that the system was working as intended. I had betrayed the woman who stood barefoot in the street watching her house burn. I opened the family ledger. I did not log this under standard maintenance. I created a new tag. I typed it in all caps, the letters looking like jagged scars on the screen. Tag after fire. I entered the date January 2nd. Action fixed Glenn's tax fraud. Reset Candace's password. Sanitized Tesser's price gouging. Gave financial advice to Kyle. Context: I am homeless. I am traumatized. They are asking for cute spreadsheets. The payment $0, zero gratitude. One invite to be a prop in a risotto video. I stared at the screen. This was it. This was the bottom. I had proven to myself that I could not just quiet quit. As long as I had access, as long as I was the admin, I would always press the button. I would always fix the glitch because I was programmed to do it to stop the machine. I could not just step away. I had to break the connection. I looked at the folder I had created the night before. The exit strategy. David was right about one thing. They did need me, but he was wrong about the solution. Helping them wasn't kindness. It was enabling a disease. I closed the spreadsheet. Never again, I said. And this time I wasn't saying it to them. I was saying it to the Meyer who needed to be needed. I picked up my phone. Glenn had replied to my email. Got it. Next time, don't let it get that close to the deadline. Too much stress, Tesser had replied. Love the colors, but can you make the font size bigger? I didn't reply. I didn't throw the phone. I went to the settings menu. I turned off read receipts. I turned off notifications for the group chat. Then I went to the contact card from Mom, Dad, Tesser, and Kyle. I didn't block them. Not yet. That would be too emotional. I changed their ringtones to silent. I was done being the employee. I was ready to become the auditor, and the audit was closed. The calendar on my wall said December 20th. The air in Raleigh had turned brittle and cold, the kind of weather that makes your bones ache. It was almost exactly 1 year since the night the sky turned orange and my mother laughed. For nearly 12 months, I had existed in a state of suspended animation. I had moved from the temporary studio to a slightly better apartment on the north side of the city, a place with a security system I checked 3 times a night. I had kept my head down at Bright Forge Analytics, burying myself in data models and variance reports, finding comfort in numbers because numbers did not lie. Numbers did not smile at you while you burned. I had maintained a silence that felt like holding my breath underwater. I did not visit. I did not call. When they messaged, and they did sporadically, when they needed something, I gave them the bare minimum, a yes or no forwarded document. I was gray-rocking them before I even knew the term. I thought I was healing. I thought I was moving on. Then came the notification. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my beige sofa, scrolling mindlessly through social media, a habit I knew was dangerous, but could not seem to break. The algorithm, cruel and efficient, pushed a post to the top of my feed. It was from Tesser. The photo was high resolution, professional quality. It showed Tesser, Candace, and Glenn standing in a sunlit field. They were wearing coordinating outfits in shades of cream and oatmeal. They looked serene. They looked lighter. They were laughing, heads thrown back, holding hands in a circle. But it was the caption that stopped my heart. 1 year of healing. Tesser had written, sometimes the universe removes people from your life to clear the air. It has been a hard journey, but we are finally breathing freely. 1 year of letting go of toxicity, negativity, and the heavy energy that was holding us back. Here is to living intentionally. Here is to the real ones. I read it twice, then a third time. Toxicity, heavy energy. They were talking about me. They were rewriting the history of the fire. In their version, the fire wasn't a tragedy caused by faulty wiring and negligence. It was a spiritual cleansing that removed the negative energy from their lives. And I was the negative energy. I was the heavy thing they had to drop to float so high. I looked at the comments. Kyle had commented first. Of course, 3 fire emojis. Then we up now. No more anchors. An anchor. That is what I was to him. Not the sister who paid his bail. Not the sister who fixed his credit. An anchor. Then Candace's comment. Hint to the top. So proud of this family's growth. We protected our peace. And look at how we blossomed. Love you all so much. They had erased the part where they stood by and watched me lose everything. They had erased the part where I slept in a motel while they ate brunch. They had twisted the narrative so completely that the victim was now the villain and the bystanders were the survivors. I felt a physical sensation in my chest, sharp and cold, like swallowing a shard of ice. I did not cry. Crying was for the Meyer who stood in the street, in an oversized t-shirt. That Meyer was gone. I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. The fan whirred to life, a steady mechanical sound in the quiet room. I opened the file, the family ledger. It had been dormant for a few weeks. I hadn't added new entries because I hadn't done new favors, but the data was all there, preserving the truth in rows and columns. I went to the Data tab. I applied a filter. I selected all entries for the last 5 years. I looked at the column labeled Task Description. It was a wall of text: tax prep, legal review, crisis management, loan consolidation, vendor negotiation, reputation management. I had always looked at these tasks as favors. I had looked at them as the price of admission to the family. But looking at Tesser's post, seeing the word toxicity, I realized I had been mislabeling the data. This was not hell. This was labor. I opened a new browser tab. I started searching for market rates. I looked up the hourly rate for a forensic accountant in North Carolina, $250 an hour. I looked up the rate for a crisis PR manager, $300 an hour. I looked up the rate for a small business legal consultant, $350 an hour. I went back to the ledger. I created a new column, Market Value. I started calculating for Glenn. I took the hours I spent untangling his receipts, fighting the IRS, and setting up his payroll systems. I multiplied it by the accounted rate. 32 hours in tax season 2021, 40 hours in 2022. The audit defense in 2023. That was 60 hours. The number in the cell at the bottom of Glenn's column ticked up. $10,000, $25,000, $42,000. I moved to Tesser the cute spreadsheets, the contract reviews, the vendor disputes. I settled so she wouldn't have to scream at a florist. $18,000 I moved to Candace. The brand management, the technical support, the copyright filings I did for her blog. $21,000 I moved to Kyle. The direct cash transfers, the bail, the loans that were never repaid. $15,000. I summed the total. The figure on the screen was staggering. It was nearly $100,000 over 5 years. That was the toxicity they had let go of. They hadn't let go of negative energy. They had let go of a 6-figure or a subsidy. I stared at the number. My hands were trembling, not from sadness, but from a vibrating white-hot rage. They called me toxic while they stood on a platform built for my unpaid labor. But as I scrolled through the ledger looking for missed entries, my eyes caught something. It was a detail in the notes section of an entry from 6 months ago. It was related to Candace. Note: Candace signed a new exclusivity deal with Pure Life Home. Major contract, $50,000 a year. Condition of contract: influencer must maintain financial transparency and ethical alignment. No gambling. No undisclosed income sources. I remembered reviewing that contract. I remembered warning Candace that Pure Life Home was a publicly traded company and they were serious about their vetting. Then I looked at an entry for Glenn from 3 months ago. Note: Glenn asked me to deposit cash from the off-books renovation job into a personal account because his business account is flagged for the lien. I refused. I froze. I remembered that conversation. I had refused. But Glenn never stopped doing what he wanted. He just found a different path. I opened the banking portal for the joint account I still shared with Candace, the one I had emptied but not closed because the bank required both signatures to dissolve it and she refused to come to the branch. I looked at the transaction history. There were deposits, cash deposits, $3,000, $4,000, $2,000. They were irregular. They were made at ATMs in the part of town where Glenn had his off-books job sites. Glenn was using Candace's personal account, the account linked to her Social Security number to launder the cash he was hiding from the IRS. And Candace, the perfect mom with the ethical alignment clause in her $50,000 contract, was the account holder. I sat back. The air in the room seemed to hum. If Pure Life Home audited Candace, which they had the right to do under Clause 6 of her contract, they would see thousands of dollars of untaxed, unexplained cash flowing through her account. They would see it as money laundering. They would see it as a breach of ethics. They would void the contract. They would sue for the advance. And if the IRS looked at that account, they wouldn't just see Glenn hiding money. They would see Candace as an accomplice. The perfect mom and the self-made dad were unwittingly pointing the loaded gun at each other. And they were doing it in an account that I had access to. They had built their healing and their intentional living on a foundation of fraud, and they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was the only one who knew how to read the blueprints. I looked at Tesser's post again. The universe removes people. No, Tesser, I whispered to the screen. The universe didn't remove me. You did. And now you have no one to check the wiring before you turn on the power. I felt a shift in my mind. The last vestige of the terrified daughter who just wanted to be loved evaporated. In her place sat the analyst, the auditor, the woman who knew exactly where the bodies were buried because she had been forced to dig the graves. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to comment on the post. I didn't need to engage in a public war of words that would only give them more content. I typed a sentence into the notes section of the ledger just for myself. Power isn't yelling. Power is access. They thought power was likes. They thought power was controlling the narrative. They were wrong. Power was the ability to turn off the lights. I moved my mouse to the top left corner of the screen. I created a new folder. I didn't name it Revenge. That was too emotional. That was too messy. I named it Exit Plan. I dragged the screenshot of Tesser's post into the folder. I dragged the PDF of Candace's Pure Life contract into the folder. I dragged the export of the suspicious cash deposits into the folder. I dragged the spreadsheet calculating my market value into the folder. My heart rate slowed down. My breathing became even. They wanted to live without me. They wanted to call me toxic. They wanted to celebrate their freedom. Fine. I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would give them a world completely, utterly void of my protection. I would withdraw my labor, my silence, and my oversight. I looked at the date again. December 20th. The anniversary of the fire was in 9 days. Happy anniversary, I said softly. I clicked save. The file icon blinked once, then sat solid and waiting on my desktop. The weapon was loaded. Now I just had to wait for them to pull the trigger. The morning I initiated the exit plan, I did not wake up with a sense of dread. I woke up with the cold, hard clarity of a surgeon scrubbing in for an amputation. The limb was gangrenous. It had to go to save the body. I sat at my desk at 7 in the morning. I had a pot of black coffee, a notepad, and my laptop. I did not have music playing. I needed the silence. Step 1 was the audit. I opened a fresh document and began to list every single digital tether that bound me to the Perry family. It was nauseating. I held the login credentials for Glenn's construction management software. I was the primary administrator for the domain hosting Candace's blog. I was the billing contact for Tesser's subscription to her design platforms. I was listed as the recovery email for Kyle's trading apps. They had not just asked for help. They had built their entire digital existence on the bedrock of my email address. If I changed my password, they would be locked out of their own lives. If I deleted a notification, they would miss a payment. I typed out the list. It ran for 3 pages. Step 2 was the documentation. This was the most critical part. I was not going to destroy their files. I was not going to delete their data. That would be petty. And more importantly, it would give them ammunition to call me a saboteur. I needed to be unimpeachable. I was going to hand them back their lives in perfect organized condition. I spent 4 hours exporting reports. I downloaded Glenn's tax compliance schedule for the next fiscal year. I created a PDF document listing every single filing deadline, payroll tax, sales tax, quarterly estimates. I highlighted the dates in red. I exported the password keychain for Candace. I put every username and password into a secure password-protected PDF. I wrote clear step-by-step instructions on how to reset a password without calling me. Click link, enter code, create new password. It was a manual for a child or for a narcissist who refused to learn. I pulled the budget sheets for Tesser's upcoming weddings. I created a column clearly marked status. I marked every unpaid vendor deposit in bold, red text. Step 3 was the extraction. This was the dangerous part. This was where I cut the wire. I went into the settings of every account one by one. I located the admin or authorized user section. Glenn Perry Construction Users. Meyer Perry. I clicked Remove. Candace Weistel Brand Hosting Tech Support Contact. I replaced my email with Candace's personal Yahoo address. Tesser Events Billing credit card on file. I removed my card. The system popped up. A warning service will be suspended if no valid payment method is added. I clicked confirm. Step 4 was the financial firewall. I logged into my own bank account. I set up a filter on Zelle and Venmo. Any request coming from Kyle's number was to be auto-declined. I did not want to see the notification. I did not want to see the plea. I just wanted the wall to be solid. By 1:00 in the afternoon, the back-end work was done. My digital fingerprint had been scrubbed from their systems. I was no longer an admin. I was no longer a guarantor. I was just a ghost. Step 5 was the announcement. I picked up my phone. I opened the family group chat, which had been silent since the toxicity post. My thumbs hovered over the glass. I did not want to be cruel. I did not want to be emotional. I wanted to be final. I typed effective immediately. I will no longer be managing any financial, administrative, or operational tasks for anyone in this family. I have transferred all data, passwords, and schedules back to you via email. Please do not contact me for technical support, tax questions, or loans. I'm stepping back to focus on my own life. I hit send. I placed the phone on the desk and watched. It took less than 30 seconds. Kyle was first. "Lo, what is this?" "April Fools in December. You are such a drama queen." Meyer, "I just need $20 for gas." Then Tesser, "Meyer, are you serious? I have the bridal expo next week. I cannot handle the vendor portal. You know it crashes on my laptop. You cannot do this right now. It is literally my busy season." Then Candace. The text was long, filled with soft language. "Sweetie, I think you are spiraling. This sounds like trauma talking. We are all worried about you. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? We can talk about boundaries in a healthy way. I will make tea. Let's not make rash decisions that hurt the family brand." Then Glenn, "You are being selfish. Family helps family. You know I'm not good with the computer stuff. If I miss a bit because of this, that is on you. Grow up and do your part." I read the messages. I felt the old reflex, the twitch in my chest that wanted to apologize, to fix it, to smooth it over. "It is just a portal." The voice in my head whispered, "It will only take 5 minutes." But then I looked at the folder on my desktop named Exit Plan. I looked at the calculation of the $100,000 of unpaid labor. I remembered the laugh as my roof collapsed. I did not reply. I did not argue. I did not justify. I turned back to my laptop and began the final transfer. I opened a new email to Glenn. Subject handover tax compliance. "Dad," I typed. "Attached is a full schedule of your tax obligations for the coming year. Please note that the payroll filing is due on the 15th. I have removed myself as the authorized agent. You will need to hire a CPA immediately to handle this, as the penalties for missing another deadline will be severe. The login for your portal is in the attached document." I no longer have access. I attached the files. I hit send. Then I went to the State Contractor Licensing Board website. I found the form for removal of guarantor. I filled it out digitally, signing my name to strip my liability from his business license. I submitted it. I opened an email to Candace. Subject handover. Accounts passwords. "Mom," I typed. "Attached is a secure list of every password for your social media, email, and bank accounts. Also attached is a calendar export of your contract deliverables for the next 6 months. I have removed my phone number from the two-factor authentication. The next time you log in, the code will go to your phone. If you lose the password, you will need to contact customer support yourself. I have turned off all reminders on my end." I attached the files. I hit send. I opened an email to Tesser. Subject handover event budgets Tesser. I typed attached is the current status of the budget for the June and September weddings. Please look at the rows highlighted in red. These are unpaid vendor deposits. I have removed my credit card from the software, so autopay will no longer work. You need to update the billing information by tomorrow or the account will lock. I have also left the email threads with the florist and the caterer. You are now the sole point of contact. I attached the files. I hit send. Finally, I sent a text to Kyle just to him. I have blocked requests on Venmo. I am not lending you money again. If you need cash, I suggest you sell the drone you bought with the money meant for your car insurance. I put the phone down. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't the silence of preparation. It was the silence of a bomb that had been dropped. The split second before the shockwave hits, my phone started ringing. It was Glenn. I watched the screen light up. Dad calling. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it started again immediately. Dad calling. I pressed the volume button on the side of the phone to silence the ringer. Then Candace called. Then Tesser. My phone was vibrating across the desk surface. A frantic buzzing dance. They were realizing that this wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a mood. They were logging into their accounts and seeing the notifications. User removed. Access revoked. Card deleted. Glenn was probably staring at a login screen that demanded a code he didn't know how to generate. Tesser was probably looking at a payment failed banner on her precious moodboard software. Candace was probably realizing that she didn't know the password to her own email. I sat there and watched the notifications pile up. Text from Tesser. You cannot do this. The flower order is pending. Text from Glenn. Pick up the phone now. Text from Candace Meyer. This is cruel. You are hurting us on purpose. I took a deep breath. I am not hurting you. I said to the vibrating phone. I am just giving you your own lives back. I stood up. I walked to the window. The winter sun was setting, casting long, cold shadows across the parking lot. I felt light. It was a strange, dizzying sensation, like setting down a backpack filled with stones that you had been carrying since you were a child. I had spent 31 years managing their emotions, their finances, and their mistakes. I had thought that carrying the weight was the only way to keep them close, but they hadn't wanted me close. They just wanted the porter. I went back to the desk. I did one last thing. I opened the email settings for my personal account. I created a rule. If sender contains Glenn Perry or Candace Perry or Tesser Perry or Kyle Perry, skip inbox. Move to folder the noise. I didn't want to block them completely. I needed the evidence. I needed to document their reaction for the ledger, but I did not need to see it in real time. I activated the rule. The inbox was empty. The phone was silent on the desk. I walked to the small kitchenette in my apartment. I opened the fridge. I had bought a bottle of cheap white wine. I poured a glass. I wasn't celebrating a victory. I was celebrating a funeral. I had just buried the role of the beautiful daughter. I took a sip of the wine. It was crisp and cold. Good luck, I whispered. I knew what was coming. I knew Glenn would ignore the tax schedule until the IRS letters turned pink. I knew Tesser would ignore the budget until the checks bounced. I knew Candace would lock herself out of her account within 24 hours. But for the first time in my life, that was not my problem. I sat down on the sofa and opened a book, a novel, fiction, something that had nothing to do with numbers or crisis. I read the first page. I understood the words. My mind wasn't racing to solve a problem for someone else. The exit plan was executed. The bridge was cut. Now I just had to sit on the bank and watch the current take them wherever they were destined to go. The silence I had imposed upon my life was not empty. It was heavy with the vibrations of a distant collapse. In physics, when a support beam is removed from a poorly constructed building, the structure does not always fall instantly. It groans first. It settles. The drywall cracks. The windows shutter. And then gravity takes what is owed. I sat in my apartment, now furnished with a second-hand desk and a proper bed, and watched the dominoes fall from the safety of my digital fortress. I did not need to see them in person. The evidence arrived in my inbox, filtered into the folder I had named the noise. The first domino was Glenn. It started 10 days after I sent the handover email. The 15th of the month had come and gone. This was the deadline for the quarterly payroll tax filing I had warned him about. In bold, red letters, I received a notification from the state tax board. Since my name had been on the account for years, their system had not fully processed my removal request yet. So I was carbon copied on the automated delinquency notice. Notice of failure to file. Penalty assessed. $1,200. 2 hours later, the email from Glenn arrived. Subject IRS mistake. Meyer, he wrote, I got a letter. They are charging me a penalty. I think their system is broken because I told the secretary to mail the check, but the form is confusing. There are boxes here for withholding that I do not understand. Just call them for me. Just explain the numbers. I'm too busy on the site to sit on hold for 3 hours. It will take you 10 minutes. He did not apologize. He did not acknowledge that I had quit. He simply assumed that if he presented me with a crisis, my conditioning would override my boundaries. I did not reply. I did not call. I marked the email as read and dragged it into the noise. 3 days later, another email came. This time the tone had shifted from annoyance to aggression. You are costing me money. Meyer, this is childish. I am your father. Pick up the phone. I sipped my tea and watched the cursor blink. He wasn't losing money because of me. He was losing money because for 20 years he had refused to learn how to run the business he claimed to be the king of. The second domino was Tesser. This was louder. It involved the florist for the September wedding, a high-end botanical artist who required a 50% deposit 6 months out. That date was yesterday. I had removed my credit card from Tesser's vendor portal. I had sent her the schedule. I had highlighted the deadline. At 10:00 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't have saved. It was the florist. Hi, Mir. This is Sarah from Petal Thorn. We tried to process the deposit for the Miller wedding, but the card on file was declined. We have another bride waiting for that date. If we do not receive payment by noon, we have to release the date. I tried Tesser, but her voicemail is full. I felt a pang of professional guilt. Sarah was a good vendor. She didn't deserve this, but I could not fix it. If I paid it, I was back in. I forwarded the text to Tesser's email with a single line, forwarding for your awareness. I do not have a card on file. The reaction was instantaneous. Tesser bypassed the text and went straight to voice memos. I saw the audio file appear in the chat. I played it on low volume. Meyer. Her voice was shrill, trembling with panic. Oh my God. Sarah just emailed me saying she's canceling the Miller wedding. Are you crazy? You cannot just delete the card. That is my reputation. You are sabotaging me. 10 minutes later, another message. The tone had shifted from anger to a frantic weeping begging. Please, Meyer, I do not have the liquidity right now. The client check hasn't cleared. Just put it on your card for 24 hours. I promise I will wire it back. Please, I cannot lose this venue. It is a $30,000 contract. I looked at the transcript of the message. Just put it on your card. That was the trap. It was always just 24 hours, and then it would be a week, and then she would buy a new purse and I would be the one paying interest on a floral arrangement for strangers. I did not respond. An hour later, the tone shifted again. The third stage of grief. Lame. You are doing this on purpose. She texted. You are jealous because I am successful and you are miserable. You are trying to destroy my business because you are bitter about the fire. You broke my wedding season. I hope you are happy. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't miserable either. I was just solvent. The third domino was Candace. It was a small thing, but for Candace, the small things were the only things that mattered. She had an appointment with a specialist for her migraines, a condition that suspiciously flared up whenever she faced accountability. I used to manage her medical calendar. I used to call her 2 hours before, send her the Yuba, and ensure the COI was handled. I had wiped her schedule from my phone. I received an automated receipt from the clinic email, which was still forwarding to me despite my efforts to unsubscribe. Receipt for payment, no-show fee, $150. Later, that evening, I saw a post on her private Facebook page. It was a picture of her looking worn and tragic, lying in a darkened room with a cold compress on her head. So hard when you feel like you are carrying the weight of the world alone. She wrote, missed a doctor's appointment today because of brain fog. The world is so unkind to those of us who feel deeply. Just wish I had a support system that understood. She didn't mention that the support system had sent her a calendar invite with a reminder instructions manual 2 weeks ago. She was facing the reality that without a personal assistant, she was just a disorganized woman losing money she didn't have. And then there was Kyle. Kyle's crash was the most violent because his entire life was a leveraged gamble. He had been relying on me to cover the bridge between his credit card bill and his crypto payout. He assumed, like he always did, that if he pushed it to the edge I would panic and pay to save his credit score. I didn't. He sent a screenshot of his bank account. It was overdrawn by $400. "You are literally ruining me," he texted. "I need gas money to get to the warehouse. I can't flip the shoes if I can't pick them up. You are preventing me from working. This is financial abuse, Meyer." I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. Financial abuse. The audacity was breathtaking. I, who had given him nearly $15,000 over 5 years, was abusing him by closing the wallet. But amidst the chaotic symphony of their failures, something darker emerged. A twist I had not accounted for. It arrived in the mail on a Thursday. A physical letter redirected from my old address by the Postal Service. It was from a digital lending platform, one of those high-interest, quick approval services that prey on the desperate. The envelope was marked "Urgent Identity Verification Required." I opened it with a letter opener, my hands steady. "Dear applicant," it read, "we have received your application for a personal loan in the amount of $20,000 to finalize the approval. We require additional verification of your income status, as the pay stub provided appears to be modified." I froze. I had not applied for a loan. I had an 85-point credit score and a savings account. I did not use predatory lenders. I looked at the date of the application, January 3rd. That was 3 days after I sent the handover email, 3 days after I told them the Bank of Meyer was closed. I went to my computer. I pulled up the credit monitoring service I subscribed to. I ran a fresh report. There it was. A hard inquiry from the lending company and another one from a utility provider for a commercial property. Someone was trying to open accounts in my name. I did not scream. I did not call the family group chat to demand answers. The Meyer who would have done that, the Meyer who would have sought an emotional confession, was dead. I went into forensic mode. I called the lending company. I spoke to their fraud department. I am stating for the record that I did not make this application. I said, my voice recording on my own device. I would like to see the IP address associated with the application and the email address used. They were hesitant, but when I mentioned filing a police report, they cooperated. The application was submitted from an IP address in Raleigh, the agent said. The email address on file is Glenn Perry Construction, admin, com himself, likely assuming he could pay it back before I noticed. He was using my social security number, which he had in his files from when I was an employee, to commit identity fraud. He was stealing from me. I hung up the phone. I felt a coldness that went deeper than the bone. This wasn't just toxic family dynamics anymore. This was a felony. I opened the family ledger. I created a new tab, criminal evidence. I logged the call. I logged the hard inquiry. I scanned the letter. Then I went to the police department's online portal. I did not file charges against my father. Not yet. I filed an identity theft affidavit. It was a formal declaration that my identity had been compromised. It placed a fraud alert on my credit file. It meant that if Glenn tried this again, the police would be notified automatically. I was not saving him this time. I was building a cage. While I was fortifying my defenses, I watched them crumble publicly. The rebranding began on social media. The posts about toxicity and healing disappeared, replaced by vague, moody black and white photos. Candace posted a picture of a storm cloud. Some battles are fought in silence. The devil works hard, but we pray harder. Taking a step back to focus on mental health. She wasn't taking a step back. She was likely unable to pay her internet bill because she lost the password to the Provers' portal. Tesser posted a quote, "Betrayal comes from those closest to you, but the cracks were spreading to the people around them." I received a text from David, Tesser's fiancé, Meyer. He wrote, "I am sorry to bother you. Tesser is in a meltdown. She says you are trying to ruin the wedding, but I looked at the budget she left open on her laptop." I waited. The 3 dots bounced. I saw the column for the florist. The deposit was due 2 months ago. "You weren't even managing the budget then, right?" That was when she said she was handling it. I replied simply, "Correct. I only flagged it. I did not create the debt." David, That is what I thought. She told me you forgot to pay it, but the timestamp on the vendor email says she was notified 3 times. Meyer, I am starting to see what you meant about the system. I didn't reply to that. I didn't need to. David was an architect. He knew what happened when a foundation was rotten. He was finally looking at the blueprints, and he was realizing he was marrying into a sinkhole. That night, I opened the family ledger one last time before bed. I looked at the exit plan checklist. Step 1, audit done. Step 2, transfer done. Step 3, extraction done. Step 4, financial firewall done. And now a new item I hadn't planned for, but checked off nonetheless. Step 5, threat neutralization, fraud alert, active. I looked at the column where I used to track my guilt, the narrative column where I used to write down how bad I felt for not doing enough. It was empty. I didn't feel guilty that Glenn was facing a fine. I didn't feel guilty that Tesser lost her florist. I didn't feel guilty that Kyle was broke. I felt light. I realized that the burning house hadn't been the tragedy. The tragedy was that I had stayed in the smoke for so long, trying to breathe for people who were holding the matches. I closed the laptop. The screen went dark. My phone buzzed one more time. It was a notification from my bank app. Fraud alert. Attempted charge of $500 at luxury auto repair declined. Kyle trying to fix his car with my old card numbers. I swiped the notification away without a second thought. Access denied, I whispered. I turned off the light for the first time in a year. The nightmares of the fire didn't come. Instead, I dreamed of a clean white room with a door that only locked from the inside, and I was holding the only key. The digital fortress I had built was impenetrable, but I had forgotten that my family did not respect physical boundaries any more than they respected digital ones. When you cut off the supply line to a parasite, it does not just wither away quietly. It detaches and comes looking for the host. The confrontation began on a Tuesday, exactly 14 days after I sent the handover email. I was leaving the coffee shop around the corner from Bright Forge Analytics. It was a gray-biting afternoon. I had a cup of tea in one hand and my phone in the other, checking a variance report. I felt a hand clamp onto my bicep. I did not scream. I spun around, swinging the hot tea as a shield. It was Kyle. He looked terrible. My brother, who usually spent 3 hours a week grooming his beard and curating his streetier aesthetic, looked like he had slept in his car. His eyes were rimmed with dark purple circles. His hoodie was stained. He smelled of stale energy drinks and panic. "You have to unblock me," he said. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He squeezed my arm hard enough to bruise. "Meyer, seriously, you have to unblock the Venmo now." I pulled my arm away. I took a step back, creating a zone of safety. People on the sidewalk were glancing at us. A professional woman in a trench coat and a frantic young man in a stained hoodie. "I am not unblocking anything, Kyle," I said. My voice was low and steady. "I told you. The bank is closed." "You don't understand," he hissed, his voice cracking. "This isn't about buying sneakers. Okay, I owe people. Real people, not credit card companies. They are calling me. They are threatening to come to the warehouse. Then sell the inventory," I said. "Sell the drone. Sell the Tesla." "I can't," he shouted. "The Tesla is impounded again, and the inventory is leveraged. If you don't give me $2,000 by tonight, I am dead. Do you hear me? I am dead. Are you going to let your brother die over money?" It was a performance I had seen a dozen times. The hyperbole, the threat of self-destruction. He was weaponizing his own incompetence to hold me hostage. I looked him in the eye. I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no fear, just the cold calculation of an auditor looking at a bad investment. "You are not going to die, Kyle," I said. "You are just going to face the consequences of your own bets." "You are a monster," he spat. "You are actually a psychopath. How can you stand there and watch me drown?" "I am not watching you drown," I replied. "I am just refusing to be the life raft you poke holes in. You do not die because I do not give you money. You feel like you are dying because you have never learned how to survive without feeding on me." I turned to walk away. He lunged, grabbing my shoulder again. "If you walk away, don't ever come back," he screamed. "Don't come crawling back when we are all rich and you are nothing. I brushed his hand off my coat, as if it were a speck of ash. Wretch, I asked, raising an eyebrow. Kyle, you are asking your sister for gas money on a Tuesday afternoon. Good luck with the Empire. I walked back to my office building. I did not look back. I knew he was standing there filming me, probably composing a TikTok about how his toxic sister abandoned him. It did not matter. The ledger was balanced, but the assault was coordinated. Kyle was the shock troops. Candace was the heavy artillery. 2 days later, on a Thursday evening, my intercom buzzed. I ignored it. I was not expecting a delivery. Then came the knocking. It was persistent, rhythmic, and demanding. It was the knock of someone who believed they owned the building. I looked through the peephole. It was Candace. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, even though the hallway was dim. She had a scarf wrapped around her head, like a celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi. I debated pretending I wasn't home, but I knew her. She would sit in the hallway and weep until the neighbors called the police, and then she would spin that into a story about how I locked my own mother out in the cold. I unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door 6 in. I planted my foot at the base of the frame. Meyer, she exhaled a tragic breath of air. She took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were red, swollen, and carefully devoid of mascara so the tears would look more authentic. Oh, thank God. I thought something happened to you. I am fine, Mom, I said. I did not move my foot. Can I come in? She asked, making a move to push the door open. I brought you some of that tea you like. We need to talk face to face. No screens. We can talk here, I said. I am not hosting tonight. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. Hosting? I am your mother. Meyer, you don't host me. I am family. What do you want, Candace? I asked. I stopped calling her Mom. It felt more accurate. The family is falling apart, she said, her voice trembling. Glenn he is not himself. He got a letter from the city about his license. He is talking about shutting down the business. Tessa is hysterical. She had to refund a client today because she couldn't pay the caterer. And Kyle is saying scary things. She looked at me, pleading. Is this what you want? Do you want to destroy us? Is this your revenge? I am not doing anything to you. I said, I simply stopped doing everything for you. If your lives are collapsing because I stopped answering emails, then you didn't have lives. You had a dependency. We raised you, she cried, her volume rising. We gave you everything, and the moment we hit a rough patch, you abandoned us because of a fire. Meyer, it was an accident. We lost things too. You didn't lose anything, I said, my voice hardening. You gained followers. You gained sympathy. I lost my home, and while it burned, you laughed. Candace froze. She blinked rapidly. I didn't laugh. That is your trauma distorting your memory. I was in shock. It was a nervous reaction. I have the video, I said. Kyle didn't delete the raw footage. I saved it. You smiled. You said Calmer took out the trash. I was joking. She shrieked. My God, Meyer, you are so sensitive. You hold on to this grudge like a shield. The insurance paid you out. You have money. Why are you punishing us for a house that was fully covered? It is not about the money, I said. And it is not a grudge. It is a boundary. A grudge is when you drink poison and hope the other person dies. I am just refusing to drink the poison anymore. You are being cruel, she spat. You want to see us suffer. I want a family that doesn't laugh when I lose my home. I said, I want a mother who asks if I am hurt before she checks her lighting. Since I don't have that, I prefer to be alone. You will regret this, she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. When you are old and alone in this cold apartment, you will wish you had us. I was alone in a motel room while you ate brunch. I said, I have already been alone. It is peaceful. I started to close the door. Len is sick, she blurted out. It was a Hail Mary pass. He is sick with stress. He thinks the city is going to investigate the permit for that flip house. He is terrified. Meyer, you have to help him with the audit. I paused. The flip house. Yes, she said, desperate now that she had my attention. The one on 4th Street. He is just a man trying to provide. He made a mistake with the paperwork. He didn't make a mistake. I said, he forged my signature. He didn't mean it like that, Candace cried. He just needed a guarantor. He was trying to save money on the electrician so he could pay for your sister's wedding venue. He even had his guy go over there to check the wiring himself so it would be safe. He did it for us. I stopped. My hand tightened on the doorknob. Wait, I said. What did you say? He did it for the family. No, I said before that you said he had his guy check the wiring. Yes, Candace said, thinking she was making a point about Glenn's diligence. He didn't hire the expensive union electrician because the permit was stuck. So he sent his guy over to look at the panel. He checked everything. He said it was fine. Which house, Candace? I asked. The air in the hallway seemed to drop 20. The flip house or my house? Candace blinked. She looked confused. But no, the flip house. But well, he sent the same guy to your place, too, that week just to be nice to check your breaker box because you were complaining about the flickering lights. See, he cares. The world tilted on its axis. I had complained about flickering lights a week before the fire. I remembered coming home one day and finding my back door unlocked. I assumed I forgot to lock it. He sent someone to my house, I whispered without telling me. He wanted to surprise you, Candace said. He wanted to fix it for free. And then the fire happened anyway. It was just bad luck. But he tried. Meyer, he tried to fix the wiring. My mind raced back to the fire inspector's report. Undetermined electrical failure. Potential overload in the main panel. If Glenn had sent an unlicensed worker, his guy, to tamper with my panel to fix it off the books, and then it caught fire, that wasn't bad luck. That was manslaughter by negligence. And the reason they had been so quick to call it Calmer, the reason Glenn had blamed me for bringing bad luck, the reason they wanted the narrative to be about my clumsiness, was to cover up the fact that Glenn's cheap, illegal repair had burned my house down. They knew, or at least Glenn knew, and Candace had just confirmed the timeline. Get out, I said. Meyer, please get out. I shouted. It was the first time I had raised my voice in a year. It echoed in the stairwell, sharp and terrifying. Candace stumbled back, her eyes wide with genuine fear. I slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my back against the wood, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. They didn't just laugh. They caused it. My phone rang. It was sitting on the entry table. The screen lit up. Dad calling. I stared at it. I picked it up. I slid the bar to answer. Meyer. Glenn's voice was different. It wasn't the booming voice of the self-made man. It was low, growly, and thick with fear. Your mother says she's at your door. She says you are acting crazy. I know about the electrician, Glenn, I said. Silence. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that stretched for 5 seconds. I don't know what you are talking about, he said. But his voice wavered. Candace just told me. I've lied. I needed to push him. She told me, you sent your guy to my house the week of the fire to fix the panel, the same guy you used on the flip house, where you forged my signature. She doesn't know what she is saying, Glenn stammered. She is confused. The fire report said electrical failure, I said, my voice turning into ice. You sent an unlicensed handyman into my home without my permission. He messed with the box and 3 days later it exploded. It was an accident, Glenn yelled, his composure snapping. I was trying to save you money. You always whine about the cost of things, but I was trying to help. You burned my house down, I said, and then you stood in the street and told the firemen it was my fault because I had bad luck. You let me think I caused it. You let me think I was cursed. We couldn't tell anyone. Glenn pleaded the insurance. If they knew an unlicensed worker touched it, they wouldn't have paid. We would all be liable. Meyer, listen to me. You got the money. You are fine. Why are you digging this up? You are going to ruin the family over a mistake that is already paid for. You laughed, I said. Mom laughed. It was stress. Where was the family that night, Glenn? I asked when I was standing barefoot in the ash. Where was the family? We were right there. No, I said, you were posing for photos. You were building content on the grave of my life, and you did it knowing that you were the one who struck the match. Meyer, listen. No, you listen. I said, I thought you were just selfish. I thought you were just narcissists, but you are criminals. You committed insurance fraud. You committed identity theft, and you destroyed my home. You can't prove it, Glenn said. His voice dropped to a growl. It is your word against ours. And who is going to believe the bitter daughter who abandoned her sick mother? I looked at the phone. The call timer was at 2 minutes and 14 seconds. You are right, I said. My word doesn't matter, I paused. But the family ledger matters and the call recording matters. What recording? Glenn whispered. I work in risk management. Dad, I said, I record every unknown variable. You just confessed to insurance fraud and negligence on a recorded line. I heard a sound on the other end. It sounded like he had dropped the phone or maybe collapsed into a chair. Don't, he rasped. Meyer, please don't. I am not going to do anything tonight. I said, I am going to go to sleep. I suggest you use this time to get your affairs in order, because tomorrow I am not the daughter anymore. Tomorrow I am the witness. I hung up. I stood in the hallway of my apartment. The silence was absolute. The puzzle was complete. The ledger was closed. I walked to my computer. I opened the file. I went to the tab marked the fire. I typed one final entry. Date January 15th. Discovery. The fire was not an accident. Perpetrator Glenn Perry. Instructions. Unlicensed contractor. Execution. Cover up. Candace Perry awareness. Glenn Perry. False statement to fire marshal. Motive cost cutting and concealment of unpermitted work. I saved the file. I looked at the folder named Exit Plan. It felt too small now. This wasn't an exit anymore. This was a demolition. I felt a tear run down my cheek. It was the first time I had cried in a year, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of pure agonizing relief. I wasn't cursed. I wasn't unlucky. I wasn't toxic. I was just the victim of a crime. And the criminals were sleeping in my childhood home. Not for long, I whispered. I reached for the phone to call the only number that mattered now. Not family, not friends. I dialed the number for the state insurance fraud investigator listed on the bottom of my claim forms. It was late, but I knew I could leave a voicemail. My name is Meyer Perry, I said to the machine. I have new evidence regarding claim number 459-882. I also have evidence regarding a forged municipal permit. Please call me back. I am ready to talk. The collapse did not happen in slow motion. It happened all at once. A synchronized implosion of 4 separate lives that had been built on a foundation of sand and my signature. 3 days after I left the voicemail for the insurance investigator, the world broke open for the Perry family. It started on a Monday morning. I was at my desk at Bright Forge sipping coffee when I received an alert on my phone. It was not a text from my family. It was a news notification about a local business. Glenn Perry construction license suspended pending municipal investigation into fraudulent permits. The city had moved fast. My affidavit regarding the forged signature on the flip house had triggered an audit of all his recent permits. They found the patent. By noon, the second blow landed. Candace called me 7 times. I did not answer. Then I saw the press release. Pure Life Home had publicly severed ties with their brand ambassador due to financial irregularities and breach of the ethical conduct clause. They were suing for the return of the $50,000 advance. They had audited the account. I flagged the one Glenn was using to wash his cash and found the breach immediately. By 2:00 in the afternoon, Tesser's website went dark. The hosting provider, which I had stopped paying, had pulled the plug. Simultaneously, the venue for her biggest wedding of the season had released the date to another couple because the deposit check drawn on an account with insufficient funds had bounced, and Kyle was effectively in hiding. The investors he owed money to were not the kind who sent emails. They were the kind who showed up at his warehouse. I watched it all from my screen. It was clinical. It was inevitable. But they had one last move. They always had one last move. At 5:00, as I walked out of my office building, they were waiting. They stood in a semicircle near the revolving doors, blocking my path to the street. They looked like refugees from a destroyed kingdom. Glenn was unshaven, his polo shirt wrinkled. Candace was wearing sunglasses to hide eyes that were surely swollen, but her hands were shaking. Tesser looked pale and frantic. Kyle was looking over his shoulder, terrified of every passing car. They did not look like a family. They looked like a gang of accomplices who had been caught. "We need to talk," Glenn said. His voice was a rasp. He stepped forward, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me, but he seemed smaller than I remembered. "I have nothing to say to you," I said, clutching my bag. "I am going home." "You don't have a home," Kyle shouted, his voice cracking. "You don't have anything except what we gave you. You owe us, Meyer. You owe us everything." "Quiet, Kyle," Candace hissed. She turned to me, lowering her sunglasses. She tried to summon the perfect mom gaze, but it was fractured. "Meyer, please. This has gone too far. The police were at the house today. They were asking about the wiring. They were asking about the insurance claim." "I know," I said calmly. "I sent them." The silence that followed was absolute. The noise of the city traffic seemed to fade away. "You what?" Tesser whispered. "You called the police on your own parents." "I called the fraud unit," I corrected. "I told them the truth. I told them about the flip house. And I told them about the night of the fire." Glenn's face turned a violent shade of red. "You traitor. You ungrateful little traitor. If you don't fix this, if you don't tell them it was a misunderstanding, the whole family is finished. Do you hear me? We go to jail, Meyer. Is that what you want?" "I don't want you to go to jail," I said. "I wanted you to be honest. But you chose to lie." I reached into my bag. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out a simple manila folder. It contained the print out of the family ledger and the new report I had received that morning from the Identity Theft Protection Agency. "This came today," I said, holding up a paper. "It is a confirmation of a credit card opened in my name 3 years ago, the one used to buy materials for the quick-fix electrical job on my house." I looked at Glenn. His eyes darted away. "You used my identity to buy the cheap non-compliant breakers." I said. "You used my credit to hire your unlicensed buddy, and when his work failed and my house burned down, you let me stand in the street and believe I was cursed. You let me believe I was the problem. It was an accident," Glenn roared, "but there was no power in it. I was trying to save money. We were tight that month. I didn't mean for it to burn." "But it did burn," I said. "And when it did, you didn't confess. You laughed." I looked at Candace. "I didn't laugh," she sobbed. "I told you, Meyer. I laughed because I was stressed. It was a nervous reaction. Why can't you understand that?" "I understand perfectly," I said. "You laughed because you thought you got away with it. You thought the insurance would pay, the debt would vanish, and you could monetize the tragedy. You laughed because you won." "And stop it," Tessa snapped. "You are twisting everything. I wanted you to fail. No, I just wanted my wedding season to work. But you wanted me to fail so you could feel superior. That is why you abandoned us." "I didn't abandon you," I said. "I resigned." Kyle stepped forward. "You owe us," he screamed again. "You are the one with the steady job. You are the one with the savings. You are supposed to help. That is what family does." "No," I said. "That is what a host does for a parasite." I held the folder out, but I did not give it to them. I placed it on the concrete bench beside us. "This is the truth," I said. "This is every dollar I spent, every hour I worked, every crime you committed in my name. I have already sent digital copies to the district attorney, the IRS, and the insurance board." Glenn looked at the folder as if it were a bomb. "You sent it. I gave you a choice." I said. "For years I gave you a choice to treat me with respect. You chose to use me. Now I am choosing to protect myself. You can't do this." Candace pleaded, grabbing my arm. "Meyer, listen to me. Family is everything. Without family, you have nothing. We are all you have." I looked at her hand on my coat. I looked at her desperate, perfectly made-up face, and I felt a wave of peace so profound it was almost dizzying. "No, Mom," I said gently, removing her hand. "Family isn't everything. To you, everything is image. Everything is a post. Everything is a hustle." I took a step back. "To me, everything is the clean air I am finally breathing now that the fire is out." "Meyer," Glenn shouted, "if you walk away, you are dead to us." "I was dead to you the moment I stopped writing checks," I said. "Now I am just alive for myself." I turned around. "And one more thing," I said over my shoulder. "Don't call me. I changed my number this morning." I walked away. Behind me, I heard them arguing. I heard Kyle blaming Glenn. I heard Tessa crying about her reputation. I heard the sound of their world crumbling. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I hailed a cab, got in, and watched the reflection of the city slide over the glass. A year later, I sat on the balcony of my new condo. It was a real home this time, not a rental. It had a view of the skyline far away from the suburbs where the Perry Empire had once stood. The world had changed. Glenn Perry Construction was bankrupt. Glenn had pleaded no contest to insurance fraud to avoid a longer prison sentence. He was currently serving 2 years of probation and working as a shift manager at a hardware store. Candace had lost her platform. After Pure Life sued her, the internet sleuths dug up the rest. The Perfect Mom brand dissolved overnight. She was now living in a small apartment with Tesser, trying to sell essential oils on a new private account with 12 followers. Tesser had to cancel her wedding. David, the architect, had called it off 3 months after the confrontation. He told me in a kind email that he couldn't marry into a family that treated loyalty like a currency. Tesser was working as a receptionist, blaming me for her tragic fate to anyone who would listen. Kyle was gone. He had fled the state to avoid his debts. I didn't know where he was. And for the first time, I didn't care. I took a sip of wine and opened my laptop. I navigated to the folder that used to be called the Family Ledger. I right-clicked on the file name. I deleted the word family. I deleted the word ledger. I typed in the new name, my balance. I opened the file. It was no longer a record of debts and traumas. It was a spreadsheet of my savings, my investments, my travel plans, and the charity work I now did for victims of financial abuse. I scrolled to the bottom, past the dark history of the fire, past the investigation, past the trial. I wrote one final entry in the notes section. Date December 30th. Status solvency achieved. Narrative: the night my house burned down, they laughed. 1 year later, their world burned down. Not because I lit a match, but because I was no longer there to put it out. I saved the file. I closed the laptop. The air on the balcony was crisp and cold, smelling of winter and pine. It didn't smell like smoke. It didn't smell like fear. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet, sharp oxygen of freedom. I was Mia Perry, and I was finally debt-free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was intense, but sometimes you have to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from crossing. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe your own peaceful balcony? Please leave a comment below with your location and let me know what you would have done in Myra's shoes. If you enjoyed this story of justice and reclaiming your life, please make sure to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel. Like this video and smash that like button so more people can hear this story. Your support helps me bring these truths to light. Stay safe, stay strong, and remember, never set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. See you in the next story. Thanks.